Hi, I'm Mark with Crown and Caliber, and welcome to Hidden Gems. There are watches that are hidden gems because of the mark they left on history. And then there are the watches that push the boundaries into what next, what we're going to do in the future in watches. And this watch is at the nexus of those two things. It's the Zenith Defy El Primero 21. So let's get into it. So the Zenith Defy El Primero 21. It gets its name from the Zenith El Primero, and that is a very important movement to talk about. It came from the race to make the first automatic chronograph movement, which technically Zenith won by announcing it first and showing the first prototypes. It is a high beat, very accurate, very robust movement that almost disappeared. When Zenith finally came out with it and it wasn't immediately a giant success, it bankrupted the company. And in that, people were coming in to take everything they could from the company, sell off all the machines, the parts, in order to just get whatever they can of what was left. And luckily there was one engineer who decided, that's not right. That's not what should happen. And he literally took the tooling, the designs, and the movement they had and hid it up in the attic. And that amazing story is actually what saved them, because a few decades later, Rolex is looking for their own automatic chronograph. And that's a very expensive proposition to get into that bankrupted multiple companies. And looking around, they were able to find this fantastic movement that is hidden away in the El Primero. No one else is using it. It's robust, it's accurate, it's an amazing feat of engineering. And Rolex says, yeah, that'll do for us. And that's important because Rolex doesn't grab other people's movements. In modern Rolex, it is the only time they've used somebody else's movement. That alone is a mark for the El Primero. That helped propel Zenith back. It helped bring them back with this standard bearer, this movement that everyone knows. It's the first integrated automatic chronograph that still works today, works at a high beat, which makes it more accurate than other chronographs. And you have to appreciate the second life that something like that gives. That's so good that decades later, it's still bringing life back to this company. But thankfully, they didn't stop there. Now that they have the funds, now that they have the history behind them and the sales, now Zenith is looking at what they're going to do. And that's where we come up with this watch. So when Zenith made the El Primero, they made a high beat movement, which means it goes 36,000 vibrations per hour. That's how many ticks back and forth of the escapement. The typical watch does 28,800 vibrations per hour. When we break that down per second, that means the average watch does 8 ticks per second, and the El Primero does 10. It doesn't sound like a lot of difference, but it's a 25% increase, which allows you to regulate to a more and more accurate spot. So the higher beat rate creates a more accurate watch. There is a downside to that, which is the more times you hit something, the more wear and tear is. The more lubrication is important, the more building a robust movement's important. But Zenith did that. They made a great movement. It is robust, and it takes that extra beating quite well. So on top of that high beat El Primero movement, they then created a chronograph movement that sticks on top of that, which has a completely separate escapement. So we got the one that runs at 36,000 vibrations per hour. Now we have a chronograph with a new escapement that's separate from the main escapement that runs at 360,000 vibrations per hour. It's 100 times a second. That requires new technology. They had to create an escapement made out of a carbon matrix, carbon nanotube composite that is lightweight, strong, anti-magnetic, and able to take the 100 beats a second for an hour straight. A hairspring that's incredibly short to be able to vibrate back and forth at that speed. It's worth just turning that chronograph on and watching it. It is a marvel. The escapement runs at such a speed that it becomes just a blur to the eye. That kind of speed allows you to accurately time to 100th of a second. It is amazing what they made here. It is a step in watchmaking that takes us to the future. It is, like everything else in watches, something we don't need. We don't need this, but just the fact that we're still working on it and we're pushing the boundaries of what we're doing and what we're timing mechanically, I think is very important. In the future, we can be looking at 20, 30 years between service intervals because of the technology that Zenith is doing. I love when companies do this, and I love this watch for what it represents, not just the mark in history the El Primero made, but where Zenith is going in the future, still pushing the boundaries of not being satisfied with what they have, not being satisfied with the current technology. Everyone benefits from when we push the boundaries of the material science to create longer lasting, more accurate movements. And for that, the Zenith El Primero Defy 21 is a hidden gem. So that was the Zenith Defy El Primero 21 long-named watch. I think it's a hidden gem. What do you think is pushing the boundaries of technology? Let us know in the comments. I hope to see you next time on Hidden Gems.